Now we'll show you how easy it is to play with our Flexi shapes. They'll always be identified by an F and an S after the name of the font, and I'll use them by inserting character because each shape has been assigned a keystroke. So 5 and click OK will bring in this object here. Now I can resize this object to any size I want, so I'll make this 4.5 inches, and we'll see that it's a long satin stitch. It doesn't matter what stitch type it is because it's essentially an object, and I'm just going to duplicate that object, and then I'll change the color of the object so I can see two different objects, each a different color. I can always click off of the highlighted object and I can insert another character. I'll insert this one, which is assigned the C, and I'll bring it in. And now if I hold the shift key down, it'll actually make this larger, centered to the design. And I'll choose a different color for this, and I'll also duplicate that one as well. So now I can duplicate it and choose a fourth color. So I have two shapes that have been duplicated into 4 objects with 4 separate colors. And now I can start to play with these. Now you'll notice even though it's highlighted, I cannot really assign many different properties to it because it is essentially just a shape. I have to break it apart first. So I can break it apart by Control K, or within the break apart feature, in the lettering, in the editing, or in the edit tab. It can be found in multiple places. When I break it apart and then I highlight it again, now I can change it from a fill to an outline. And I can take this and do a motif, and if I want to, I can have a candle wick border around that object. Now I can take this object and I'm going to break it apart, and I can choose a different fill outline, and let's do a ripple effect, and I'll just click on that, click ripple. Now I can see the density looks a little bit too tight, so I'm going to click off of that object. I'm going to switch over to metric from US. I'll click back on the object. I can see that the spacing is 2 millimeters. Let's just make that a little bit wider to 4 millimeters, and you can see how it changed the effect of the object on the screen. So now I have two objects that I've identified. Now I'm going to take this one and I'm going to break it apart as well. And what I want to do is I want to make that into a motif. Now when I make this into a motif object, I can see that the motif is running underneath of the object that's there. And I can also fix that if I want to very easily within the digitize function. Well, it's highlighted, and if I click on my digitize tab, I have one that says digitize whole. Then I can go and digitize, a left click for straight and then right for curve, and I can very quickly just outline the object that I see on screen and digitize that inner shape. And when I get back to the beginning, I'll just get very close to the first object that I digitized, and then I will click the enter button and I'll click it twice. Now you can see that it actually put a hole within that object that I just digitized. So now I have a motif fill within that object. Now I'm going to take that first object and we're going to break it apart as well. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to do a edit, and we'll break it apart. And I'm going to now take that object and let's turn it into a running stitch. So now it's a single run stitch. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that and I'm going to go to my digitize appliques. And while it's highlighted, I'm going to convert to applique. And that'll give me an applique that is running first. Now I'm going to click on that object and I'm going to actually make the applique stitch a little bit wider. So the cover stitch is 2.5 millimeters. Let's make it 4 millimeters so I have a nice wide applique. Now if I look at this object, I'm going to come in and break it apart, and when it's broken apart I can now grab just the finishing stitch, move it down one step in the order so that it's going to sew down after the actual motif, and now it's covered up perfectly. I can also go in and make sure that I have the right underlay, so if I want to have an edge run underlay just around that object, it's done. Now if I look at my player, my simulated stitch player, I can see that I have a run stitch, then a tack down stitch, then it does the motif stitch for the fill, motif fill on top of the applique, then there's a finishing stitch for the applique, then it does that pattern in the center with the candle wick border, and I'm done. I've taken two very simple shapes and applied 1, 2, 3, 4 different techniques within this design.